It's been a rebuilding week of comics. We had an actual new comic stand Wednesday with some DC comics that have been long awaited, Batman the Outsiders and others. There has been a series of little bits of news, nothing major, but a lot of pieces that add up to a bigger whole. So let's go through those. Hey everybody, this is Perch. I am outside watching my kids play in a river. So if you hear that sound in the background, the slight wavy, rivery sound, it's a river. It's not like somebody perpetually going to the bathroom. I've done some videos where I'm walking, and I think, hey, life's pretty good. I've got a little headset here, just walking along, and then I listened to it later. I actually had a video that was one of the more powerful ones I did, I think, on a comic shop experience, and you hear this like in the background. It's like it's my feet, and I'm walking on the just little pebbles on this trail, and it sounds like I'm like doing. It's just terrible. It was unusable. So it's weird the things this stuff picks up. I you can pick up all these other background pieces of noise, but not like content. It's the high quality you've come to expect from the Perch show. That's what I do. Anyway, so a few little bits of news in the world of comics. So first and foremost, this is a story that's getting misrepresented a lot, and that's Marvel announcing that they're shutting down their digital comic shop. And so immediately people said, this is a sign. Disney's about to sell them. They're getting rid of them. This is the comicstore.marvel.com that is basically going to be retired. So people are like, here's proof. It's not actually proof of anything because this was a custom storefront built on Comixology. So basically you have Comixology as a backend engine, and then you have like a custom little layer storefront. And I'd actually heard for quite some time that Comixology was going to recommend against these custom storefronts and potentially even shutter them at some point. But Marvel's it'd be difficult for Comixology, even though Amazon's backing them, to say, hey, we're just shutting this thing down. But I think they put subtle pressure to stop with it. So that's what's happened. Marvel is shutting down their custom storefront. Their comics are all still going to be on Comixology. We know from the one sales leak that took place that like 99.999% of the comics bought on digital for Marvel were just done through Comixology and not Marvel's weird custom storefront. So what is going away? And nothing. Actually, nothing. Even the Comixology storefront still has banners and things when you go into the Marvel section. So this is a big non-story, but it's generating all the news and the videos and everything else. But if somebody comes at you with it, just point out like, hey, the comics are still there. This is a custom storefront. No one was buying any content through it anyway. And I would imagine that this would have required somebody at Marvel to maybe digitally keep it up. I have no idea what was going on there. But anyway, still plenty of comics. Marvel's still selling digital comics. Now, what is true here, there is one bit of truth to the story that you can glean out of it. And that's that if Marvel was making tons of money off of digital, they more than likely would either keep their custom storefront or fight to keep it, or start building their own, like Shonen Jump, or they want to own their own ecosystem. And the fact that they're content to let their digital comics just be sold through Comixology is a little bit of an indicator, or yet another indicator of the current strength of digital with Marvel, which is close to zero. But we know that. You know that from a common sense perspective. It's just one more piece of evidence that there ain't gold in those hills, so to speak. The other bit of news came as we heard that Lunar gave an interview with Newsarama about basically that they haven't heard from big, but they've talked to some of the smaller publishers. They haven't talked to big publishers, and the way the interview was worded kind of cast doubt on what would happen as we move into the fall if they would continue to be a publisher. And the interview is kind of tough to read. It was written and transcribed in kind of a weird way. But again, this is one of those ones where before people jump to conclusions that this alternate distribution plan from DC is a failure, you kind of have to look between the lines a little bit. Lunar was set up to help DC through the current problem. But what they were basically saying in the interview was they're not committing to whether they're going to continue as a distributor or not. And the other kind of between the lines thing you can read, although it's not that between the lines, is if it's unprofitable, they probably will not continue, which is kind of a no duh statement. It is, yeah. If I think that the comment you can glean out of this is in setting this stuff up, and you can assume that UCB Midtown has the same deal, that they're not held to like a 5-year have to stay in business kind of contract, that they do have outs, and if it's not a successful endeavor, they will leave. Which is again probably not a big surprise to anyone, but it got picked up as aha, for whatever, because people like aha stories. The other part that was interesting in that article, it didn't get all the pickup, mainly because I think it contradicts something Bleeding Cool is running a lot, is that there are separations, or at least they claim there's separations between retailer info and what's being shipped. And they pointed out the big diamond leak that happened, where a bunch of retailer order data was accidentally leaked to people. And they're just pointing out that the risks of exposure through a UCB or a Lunar are actually the same, or certainly no more than what already existed with Diamond. And so that was an interesting rebuttal, I think, to some of the things that have been said. The next bit of news is again concerning DC, and it's both DC Generation, Death Metal, and Three Jokers. So Three Jokers is being resolicited at a very near point, and I think what's going on there, at least from talking to some of the creators involved, is that they do not want to start soliciting this series until they were sure they could finish them, that they could do the all issues in one run, not have one issue come out and then a big long delay because of COVID or shops being shut down because it had waited so long. That was going to be something they wanted to avoid. So they're waiting for a moment where they're sure they can get all the issues out of Three Jokers, and that's what's coming. Death Metal, on the other hand, did get an announcement, and that is basically coming out in June, I believe, of 2020, this year, so not too far away. They want to start this thing going. Death Metal is looks like it's about a month and change late from when it was originally solicited, so that is not bad at all things considered. That's the full extent of that delay. And Death Metal continues to state that it is going to sort out DC continuity. This is something Scott Snyder's been saying for a long time. He's also saying it's a crescendo to the modern era of DC. I think people again are reading a little bit too much into this. They're still thinking about that 5G story that some Bleeding Cool and some other sites were running, and that the DC universe is going to be forever changed after Death Metal. And I mean, it depends on your point of view. I think there's likely going to be some story beats that allow us to continue. But the idea that like the DC universe as we know it will end, all the major superheroes will die, they'll be replaced by new, diverse, young characters we've never seen before, that's not going to happen. And there's been lots of evidence say that's not going to happen. Now, definitely you have Scott Snyder out there hyping the book up because that's kind of his job, and saying, nothing will be the same again. But remember, nothing was going to be the same again after Iron Man 2020 or Secret Invasion or Secret Empire or some other secret book, Civil War 2, nothing would be the same again. When you do an event, nothing is ever the same again. And I think that it's pretty clear at this point. June 16th, so just a month and change late. This book's going to get going. They have redone parts of the ending. They said they've redone. They haven't used the adjective. Some sites have quoted Scott Snyder as saying significant parts or major parts, but that's not what I have ever read. That they tweaked is what I hear. They adjusted to make it fit more with where things were going, and presumably what the world would look like in a post Didio world. So that's just all kind of what's on tap with that. The last one is this Generations book. Generations was supposed to get started here in, I believe in May, was supposed to get going, and that's still MIA on release schedules. And what it looks like now is Death Metal has expanded. They're doing a lot more tie-ins. They're doing a lot more anthology books. They're doing just a lot more. I mean, the cynical part of you could say they're doing a lot more to maximize the cash they're going to make off of Death Metal by adding more books to the mix. Very similar to what they did with the original Metal. So it makes sense that Generations, which is going to look at kind of this history of the DC universe, is going to get pushed back until they can go, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, just in a straight run. One of the odd parts that a lot of retailers saw before with Generations was it looked like they're going to do the first 2 parts and then skip a month, and it had a weird release schedule that just as a retailer, as a fan, would be annoying as hell to deal with. So anyway, so that's just kind of where things are at. The last bit of news, I think, in just kind of going through things, is that you have I've been wanting to do a full video on this, but it's where there's a lot of this the Hero Initiative and these charities. And so, without going too much into it, I would just point out that the Binks Foundation did give a statement saying that the money that was coming out for the creators were raising we're being tagged to comic shops. Normally, they are they put out Bink. Uh, I should get these things straight before I start putting this in. But anyway, the money versus Bink, that's BINC, is all going to comic shops. It's not going into a general book fund, as some speculated. And also, there were a couple of videos that went out of people who looked up tax returns and pointed out that a very small amount of the charity was going actually to its in target, that there was a lot of administrative overhead. And there's two statements. First, yes, in charities in general, there's always administrative overhead. And in my opinion, as a whole, not with Bink, but just overall, I don't like all that overhead going. I like nonprofits where it's purely, and you rarely see this, the administrative costs are covered by angel investors or it's not coming out of the money donated. But that's a very rare situation that happens. So generally, there's administrative overhead. My advice to you and is that if you have a way to get your cash directly to somebody in need, you do it directly. If you don't need somebody to administer the cash, don't have somebody administer the cash. Just go direct. That's a smarter move for you. But if you're unclear of how to spend the money, if you want something like they were raising money with this this comic store fund and kind of this fund that was going, they raised over $950,000. It's nice, definitely helpful to comic book shops. That and you're not sure exactly how to get your money there, and you want a piece of Jim Lee artwork, whatever happens to be, then yeah, investing in this is a fine deal. The numbers that were thrown out about how much was being delivered, I think somewhere in the 30% was actually going of the money raised, was actually going to make it to comic shops. That was gathered off of a financial filing, which these nonprofits have to do. And keep in mind that these numbers change. So if you grab one year, it's in the 30s. If you grab another year, it's in the 50s. There was another year where it was in the 70s. So it's kind of all over the place. It looked like some people grabbed the worst possible number to use as part of this. So there's just more to this story. So I'm kind of presenting two sides to piss both sides off, like I like to do. One, administrative overhead costs, I think, are bogus in general. And if you know where to give your money, just do it direct. Don't deal with these things. Two, the numbers that have been thrown out about how much they were keeping for themselves in administrative costs was overblown. Now, certainly possible in this particular situation that it was even worse. Maybe 10% was actually going to shops and 90% was overhead. That's possible. We'll know when the filings actually occur here in a year. And hopefully that's not the case. But I think to assume it's the worst possible number and that's what we're going to run with, I think is not fair play either. You have to provide that context. There's lots of accurate data, but accurate data without context is just, it's nonsense. It leads you to the wrong conclusions. So there you go. There's a handful of news in the comic industry. Lots of things happening as always. I'm walking now, so you can hear those rocks crunching under my feet, maybe. So that's great. I'm going to go fish my kids out of the river now because that's what good parents do. They haven't drowned, so life is great. Like, subscribe, share, point this at friends. I will try and deliver you the boring news as much as I get it. One of these days, I should just get super drunk and just do an outrage rampage video and watch that thing get hundreds of thousands of viewers and all the super chats. Oh, wait, that doesn't work because super chats are for live streams, and I'm too stupid to set those things up anyway, so why bother? Hey, follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and most importantly, as always, thanks for listening.